英国、1、2、3、4、5、6、7、8、14、15、16、17、20。Uzbekistan。
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome one and all. Buongiorno, bonjour, good morning, salamat pagi, zaoshang hao, wanshang hao, all of the above. Welcome to High Impact Pitching. My name is Rich Robinson, and I'm going to be leading you through the next 90 minutes so that one of you watchers out there can crush the pitch competition next month and win the 100,000 renminbi. You guys ready to rock and roll? Let's begin, shall we? Let's go to the next slide. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're going to the next slide. Here we are. Okay, good. We got the show on the road. Let's get into it, shall we? So what we're going to cover in the next hour and a half, I'll give you a little overview about myself. Let's talk about the basics of pitching, and let's talk about who we're going to pitch to. Most likely, your audience is going to be investors, and you're going to be asking for their money. Why are we going to do that? Let's spend a little time figuring that out. Who are the people that we're going to be talking to? And let's get inside their head. Let's unscrew the top of their skull, take a look inside their brain, and find out what you need to make come out of your mouth and pitch to them so that they can take out their wallet and give their money to you. And then we're going to get into some of the details of the nuts and bolts of pitching, if you will. We're going to talk about the pitching deck. That's the presentation, the PowerPoint. We're going to go through some examples based on the pitch template that you've been sent with some real life case studies of successful pitch decks. And we're going to go through the pitch talk about how to deliver it, how to use your body language, how to tell a story, how to use your voice, how to create some kind of excitement. And then we're going to go into Q&A, some questions and answers about what I just talked about. And I'll deep dive into some of your areas of interest. So, all right, let's go to the next slide, please. So my name's Rich Robinson. I'm originally from the States. I've been in China now, in Asia, for 25 years, most of my adult life. Turned 53 next month. I got 3 kids, all made in China, entrepreneur life. And I love the art of the start. My entire career has been around entrepreneurship, and it's all been in Asia. So I've been a tech serial entrepreneur. I've been part of 8 startups. 5 of those I started myself or with co-founders. I've sold 3 of those to publicly listed companies. And I've been in the entire ecosystem, the ecosystem of tech for the last quarter century as an investor, as an advisor, as a board member in dozens and dozens of companies. And I've been a very avid mentor at accelerators. So an accelerator is an organization like Y Combinator, which you might be familiar with, or Techstars in the US, 500 startups. I've been involved with 500 startups, with Stanford Ignite out of Stanford University, with Tsinghua University's Schwarzman Startup Institute, but also China Accelerator and Hacks. And these accelerators take a company for 90 days and they launch them out of the nest. They basically take them through the accelerated period to get them to fly on their own. And I've been involved with dozens and dozens of batches, cohorts, so hundreds of companies where I've been a mentor to them, and I've done pitch training. And I've also, of course, done a lot of pitching as an entrepreneur. I've been pitched to as an investor. I've coached my companies that I've invested in. And also, I love stand-up comedy. So I actually do stand-up comedy as a labor of love. And I've kind of blended my love of stand-up and humor and entertainment with my love of tech. And it fits nicely with the pitch. And I'm also a professor. I love teaching to whip smart students like yourselves. I teach here at Alibaba University, very proud and happy to do that. Also Peking University and Tsinghua Universities, the Harvard and MITs of China. Or actually Harvard and MIT are the Peking University and Tsinghua of the US. But they don't like that joke when I tell that in the US. All right, great. So enough validation, give you a reason why you should listen to me on a Saturday. Let's get into the meat of it. So pitching. Why? Why are we doing this? Why are you making us do this? What is it? And I'm also going to dig into what it isn't. So why are we doing this? Here's the thing, is that you're going to be pitching not just next month, but you're going to be pitching for the rest of your life. If we go to the next slide, please. It's really important to build up transferable skills. Skills like maybe softer skills, like networking, getting to know other people and to be able to build a network. Other transferable skills like being able to be a really good and clear writer, and that can work across many different professions and many different pursuits. Pitching is something that you might think is really kind of a one-off, that you're only going to use in this competition. It's really not true, because we're always pitching in some way. Whether you become an entrepreneur, whether you become an employee in an organization, nonprofit, government, you're always going to be pitching something. You're going to be pitching your budget. You're going to be pitching potential recruits to come and join your company. You're going to be pitching an idea to your boss. You're going to be pitching to your team. I believe we should be taking this direction. And to be able to have that mindset of clarity of thought, simplicity, to be able to be concise, to be able to make something memorable and repeatable, and to tell a story so that you can persuade somebody. There's nothing that's in your control except your own effort and your own attitude, but you are able to persuade and influence other people. And the more time and effort you give to that, the more dividends it pays out, because it builds on top of each other and it helps you to be successful in many other things. So let's talk about what pitching is not. What you're going to be doing next month is not this. The next slide, please. It's not a lecture. I know that everybody involved in this, the mindset, because years and years of school, I'm sitting in the classroom, the teacher is up there, and they're instructing me in a subject. And that's great. And many of you will probably become teachers, and I'm a perpetual student myself, and I'm proud to be a teacher, but you are not going to be teaching. You should not think of yourself as giving a lecture or standing up trying to instruct somebody. And next slide, please. And it's certainly not some kind of a tutorial. It's not a how-to. You're not going over all of the features and all of the details. You're not trying to explain the minutia so that someone can do this on their own. What you're trying to do is this. Next slide, please. You're telling a story. It's a show. Shark Tank. If you haven't watched Shark Tank, it's in many, many different countries, local teams, local languages. You should look up the equivalent of Lion's Den or Shark Tank or whatever it is, and watch and learn how other entrepreneurs pitch their companies. And of course, this is a TV show, but even in real life, at these pitch competitions, but also in the boardroom, you are trying to captivate somebody. A typical investor, if I'm looking at, say, 4 investments a day, maybe more than that. Let's say 8 investments a day, 250 work days in a year. I can only say yes so many times. I probably have to say no 1,000 times. 1,000 times a year. No, 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 nope, sorry, nope, You want them to say, wait a second. It's a maybe, and then turn that into a yes. That's what you're trying to do. So really what it is, next slide, please, is that don't forget, this is a pitching competition. It's exciting. You're competing against teams from all around planet Earth. It's a battle. It is an absolute exciting Game of Thrones battle with dragons and giants and legions of people battling against each other. And you have to come into this with your game face to compete and want to win. But also, next slide, please, you gotta bring the magic. You gotta sprinkle that pixie dust like Disney all over it. You gotta bring something special. You gotta capture people. And you gotta persuade them and bring them over to your side. That's what I want you to remember, is that you have to make a clear, concise, compelling story that captures people and has a touch of magic to it. Okay, next slide, please. So who you're gonna be pitching to? So this is a pitching competition. So of course, it's not real life. It's a simulation. But typically, you're pitching to investors. So that's the mindset we want you to take into this, is that you are going to talk to a hard-nosed investor who's saying, that woman is saying, no, 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 not me, nope, not interested, 1,000 times a year at least, probably. And you want to spark some interest to be able to get that checkbook out. So that's who we're going to be talking to here. So investors, who are they? Let's take a look in the next slide, please. Who are they, and why are you going to? Why would you even want money from them? Like what's the whole point of this exercise anyway? So what do you have? A big corporation, you know what a big company has? A big company has reputation, a brand. It has lots of users. It has lots of resources. But as a startup, you don't have any reputation. You don't have any users. You don't have any resources. You have the ability to move fast. You have the ability to innovate, and you have the ability to bring your energy and passion there, but you don't have any resources. So you need to be able to raise some resources to be able to fuel the company as you move forward. So it always starts with an idea. You have your idea, and then you recruit a team, and that team then builds that idea into a product or service, and then that team takes that product and service like a kung fu ball of power, pushes that out into the market through marketing or partnerships or some sort of perhaps viral mechanism, and then grows the user base, and then rinse repeat. A newer, better idea, put more money into that, grow the team, expand the product, grow the market size. So that's what you're working on. But really, should you take money? Is that even desirable? What happens when you take money? There is a deal with the devil, so to speak. There's pros and cons to taking money and to also doing it on your own. So of course, if you take money, then you can use that as rocket fuel to then just focus on the business. That's the idea, is that you have something that already has some growth and traction, and then you can put an accelerant inside it and then take it to the stars. And then also, by taking money from an investor, there's an assumption that there's some expertise, there's resources, there's connections oh, hey, I need help in reaching this person in the press so that I can tell them about our new launch. I need help in recruiting a new head of sales. I need help in doing a partnership with this company. And the hope, anyway, is that that investor, and they're sharks, that's why it's called Shark Tank, but now they've invested in you, so now they're your shark. They can go into battle with you. Imagine that, just dragons and sharks flying through the sky. And they can help you to go into battle. However, you start losing control of the company. It becomes less and less your company until at a certain point, you actually can even lose control of the company. So if you are an entrepreneur, if you become an entrepreneur, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to raise outside funding. There are ways of getting funding, and we'll get into that in a minute. But it's something that it really needs to be very much taken into strong consideration before you go down that path, because it's like marriage, except you can't divorce an investor because they own a piece of your company, and there's really no way out. So it has to be considered very seriously. Next slide, please. So startups go through different stages. Roughly, you can say there's kind of three main phases of startup life. First is search. You're searching for an idea. You have the idea, and you're searching for a product market fit. That elusive product market fit. Your product is in the market at the right time. Click, click, click. Those three things. You have a product in the market at the right time. Until that point, a startup is just an experiment. It's not a company. There's a definition by a professor at Stanford called Steve Blank, and it is that a startup is a vehicle to test assumptions until you find a viable, repeatable, scalable, profitable model. So a startup's not a company. Startup's a test. It's an experiment. And when you're in that search phase, that's what you're going through. And then, okay, now I've created a product that people want. I've made something that people want. It sounds very simple. It sounds almost too simple, but that's the number one rule of building a startup. Make something that people want. Now I've made something that people want. Now I'm in the build phase. Now I've built a product. Now I'm building a company. And then I go into the growth phase. Now I'm going to grow that company out. So in the first three categories there, you're basically, or the first four categories there, you're basically in the search and the build phase. Initially, you can grow the company yourself. These days, when I got into the internet industry in the mid 90s, it was expensive. Everything was, a laptop cost $5,000. You couldn't do any cloud hosting. Software was expensive. Everything was expensive. Now, I would say you could start a startup very reasonably, get it all the way into launch for $50,000, 50,000 US dollars. And that seems like a lot. Probably $25,000 to build it, $25,000 for marketing. If you go into that very first stage there with self-funding and or love funding, as I call it, the three F's, family, friends, and fools, then you can probably gather together $50,000. How would you do that? So self-funding it, even as a student, you could probably come up with some money if you really hustled $2,000 to $5,000 or $10,000 by doing some side projects. And then let's say you get 20 people. Maybe it's an uncle, maybe it's a professor, maybe it's another student, an old friend, who knows, a neighbor. And you say, you know what, I'm getting 20 people together and we're going to put $2,000 each into the company. I'm putting my own money into. And it's going to be a grand adventure, a great ride. And I want you to be part of it. And you know what? Most likely you're going to lose your money. But it's such little money, $2,000 for somebody who's further along in their journey, that It's okay if you do lose it, but it's a lottery ticket that could turn into something big. So I've taken friends and family rounds from people much larger, $50, $100, $150,000, and I've lost that money, and I've seen other people lose that money. And I strongly recommend not to do that. But 1, 2, 3, up to $5,000 US dollars. If somebody wants to take a bet on you, have fun, learn along the way, be an angel investor, then do that. And then you basically have to launch. You're not really going to get any money until you can really launch something. Maybe if you join an accelerator, you could do something with prototype, and then you can look to get venture capital or some other type of funding. But for today, we're just going to focus on the very early stage, and let's see if we can get you this grant, this 100,000 renminbi. You don't have to give any equity. You don't have to give shares of the company for this. It's basically money for you to start you on your journey. And that would get you about a third or a quarter of the way there if you're looking to raise $50,000 to launch something. So next slide, please. So if I'm an investor, what am I looking for? First and foremost, as I said before, I see a lot of this stuff. I see so many of these pitch decks. I need you to just come out and poof, grab me, punch me, knock my teeth out right from the beginning. I need you to capture and fascinate me. And then also, at a bare minimum, you really have to make something that people want. I have to really believe that this is something that people really do want. And then you have to tell me why now. So Sequoia, a sequoia is like a large redwood tree, and it's also the name of one of the top venture capital firms in the world, based out of Silicon Valley. Sequoia has a very famous PowerPoint presentation, and it talks about why now. When somebody pitches an idea, what they want to understand is, hey, it may work, it may not work, but tell me why you think it's going to work right now. What's the confluence of events? What's happening with when Uber launched and there were people that were out of jobs and they were doing more gig work, more freelance stuff. People were using their mobile phones a lot more. Mobile data was more ubiquitous. Mapping was much more ubiquitous. People were getting a lot more comfortable with renting things through their phone. Mobile payment, a lot more viable. So that all came together to make Uber into one of the fastest growing startups in the history of the world. And you also have to talk about what pain is going to be alleviated. We can dig into that later. And you got to give real reasons to invest. Hey, we have an unfair advantage. It always has to be an unfair advantage. Think about it. In anything that you're going to be successful in, you have to have an advantage that's not fair. This is not a sort of community club where everybody is cooperating. This is a competition. This is the business world. And you have to have some kind of unfair advantage in data or technology. Maybe your business model has some special sauce to it. Maybe you're addressing a new and really exciting large market. Maybe your team is totally kick-ass. It's so expert and has such deep experience and skills and network that that's going to propel the company into the future. And then lastly, as an investor, I want you to understand the risks and how you're going to mitigate that. Let's look at some real examples. Next slide, please. So at its basic, you really have to think simplicity. And you really have to create some kind of excitement and look at the team. So one of the propensities of students that I found is that they feel that they need to make things complex. I'm doing a report, I'm creating some sort of a paper, and I need to put a lot of data and a lot of complexity in there. That's not what the exercise is that you're going to be doing with this. You have to make it very simple and very compelling to understand and create some sort of excitement around it. And typically as an investor, you really want to make the team really pop and stand out. We understand that the teams pitching here don't have a very long history behind them, and that's fine. just sharing what investors really look for. So on the next slide, you'll see that the number one reason why startups fail, they do not make something that people want. So it's really important before you put together your pitch deck to really validate it and really ensure that it's not such a niche idea or it's not a solution in search of a problem before you actually launch it. And next slide, please. There's also a very interesting tool by a gentleman called Jeff Moore, and he talks about value positioning, about how to really, really very clearly state what you're doing once you've actually determined what it is that you want to do. So I won't go into this detail here. You can look that up on Google and go through that exercise and plug it in so that you're very, very clear in what you're in what you're communicating. So I'll say it one more time on the next slide. The best way for investors to look at your ideas to be clear and concise. So you need to really, really think, can I pitch this to my grandparents? It's a great exercise. You know, there's a 5-minute limit on this pitch. I highly recommend if you have a grandparent around or somebody who really has no clue about the industry that you're pitching, pitch it to them and see if they have any questions or if they're unclear about it, and really try to make it as simple as possible. All right, let's look at a real world example from WeWork. So WeWork is a global co-working space. And let's look at the next slide about how this is their pitch deck. And they raised billions and billions of dollars. So this is their initial message to Masayoshi Son, who's the founder of SoftBank. They took a 7-minute taxi ride, the founder of WeWork, Adam Neumann, and he pitched this to the Masayoshi Son, the guy who started SoftBank. SoftBank made a $20 million investment into Alibaba, and that turned into a $100 billion investment, maybe the best investment in the history of mankind. And they invested billions of dollars into WeWork. So work is changing. Okay. Work is changing. How is it changing? Go to the next slide. You've captured my attention. So you can see here that there is an inexorable march. It is just absolutely unavoidable that the workforce is moving to the gig economy. It's going to be independent. And where are they going to work? Are they all going to be in Starbucks or some coffee shop? No, they're going to need a place to work. And of course, this is before COVID, and WeWork's had some problems since then. But what we're talking about right now is how they were able to convince investors. So next slide. They showed their company overview and history and number of locations. But look at those numbers: 15,000 members, $628 per member. That's really compelling. And then the money slide, the next one, literally and figuratively, up and to the right, up and to the right, up and to the right, just showing the rapid growth. And they were able to grab the investor. So you might be saying, hey, but you know what? We're really an early stage startup. We don't really have anything going on. We don't have any market validation. We don't have any users yet. So let's look at Airbnb, another multi-billion-dollar company that's very successful in raising money. This is how they were able to capture the attention of investors. They showed external market validation. They showed what other commensurate companies were doing that they could benchmark against. And then on the next slide, they talk about their competitive advantage. And by showing that they could be first to market and how innovative they are and how easy it is to use, that's how they were able to capture the mindset, hearts, and wallets of investors. And then lastly, here's a slide from Uber's pitch deck that they, next slide, please. What's really interesting here about this slide is that I talked before about risk mitigation, about being really clear about the downside and what the downside could be. So what's really terrific about this slide that I really like is that it shows the very best case scenario, how it's, multi-billion-dollar company. And then it shows a realistic success case scenario, which is still quite compelling. And then it shows a worst case scenario as well too. And investors aren't dumb. They're always thinking about the downside. You should talk a little bit about the downside, just like, hey, I got that covered. But you don't have to spend too much time on that risk mitigation. A really good investor will think in their head, yes, and not okay, but, because there's an endless amount of okay, buts. Okay, but what about this? Okay, but what about that? But when you're getting interest from the investor, when they start asking questions about how this thing is going to scale and how big it can get, and where the additional opportunities lie once you actually have launched. Great. So let's talk about now that we've covered about the investors. Let's talk a bit about how to actually pitch. So let's talk about the deck. I call it the deck. The deck is the presentation, the slides that you'll be doing. Let's talk about the flow and content and layout, and then the actual talk. What I'm doing right here, how you're selling it, how you're persuading, the confidence and energy that you can exude, the storytelling techniques and content, your body language, and your voice. All right, let's go. Let's go into the deck itself, the materials. It's really important, and I've said it already, and I'm going to repeat it again. When you're creating the content of the deck, you want to capture and fascinate. You want to do something that really piques somebody's interest right from the very beginning. You want to tell a story. You want to make it flow and really make it memorable. And for the layout of the deck, I want you guys to abandon all of your thoughts as a student, where you're like, oh, I have a certain word count, and I need to be able to put as much data inside there as possible, and I need to have very, very precise, detailed charts. No, this is about simplicity. Less is definitely more when you're pitching. Less is more. You want high impact graphics. You want to make it memorable, and you want to make it simple. So let's see how we can do that. So when you're talking about the content, legible, simple, and obvious. When I say make it legible, it's not just about the legibility of the font, and that is important. So think of 3 scenarios here. One is, I'm in a room with 1,000 people. I'm at a big global pitch competition, and there's somebody all the way in the back. And that might be the investor that has the money for you. And that investor is probably like me, on the wrong side of 50, and eyesight is gone. You want to make it so that in 1,000-person auditorium, somebody can read what you have on the screen if they're all the way in the back hanging by the door. You also have to think about this right now, which is, this is virtual. So people are going to be reading this on their phone. They're going to be reading this on their laptop. And if you have too much text, or if the font is too small, it's never going to work. So you have to make it really, really legible. And making it simple means, as I said before, you have to make it so that not just an investor, a savvy investor, or not just your peers, or not somebody who's deep in the industry that you hope to join is able to understand it. You want it so that anybody can understand it. You want to make it totally mindless, so that it's so simple and clear and obvious. Because this is not the time to really get into the very, very big, tiny details. It's about the big picture. Because if somebody does display interest, Then it's going to turn into a call, a meeting, next steps. Then you can deep dive into the numbers. This is about capturing something, capturing attention, capturing interest. Okay, great. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this phrase has been attributed to many, many different people. I'm sorry I wrote you a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one. It's actually more difficult to be concise than it is to just splatter everything, to really understand. Like Michelangelo, they asked him about his sculptures, and he said, well, I look at a big rock, and then I just chip away everything that's not the statue. And he knows when to stop. Would that we could all be Michelangelo. It's difficult, it's challenging. So you're going to go through many, many iterations with your deck until it becomes very, very clear, concise, simple, obvious, and compelling. Let's take a look at what that could be. So Dropbox, some of you may be familiar with Dropbox. In the next slide, went through the Y Combinator accelerator. So this is from their pitch deck. Dropbox synchronizes files across your or your team's computers. Super simple. No technical speak, no jargon, very, very few words, really, really simple statement of what it actually does. So let's go to the next slide. So let's make sure what we don't do is that you don't want any mystery or any complexity or any jargon or ambiguity. You don't want people guessing. You want to tell people right from the very beginning and capture them and make it very clear. This is what we do. Here is the problem. Here is the solution. And this is what we do to make that better. And this is who we're addressing that towards. It's very structured step by step, but you can infuse some excitement, energy, and magic into that. So make it reproducible. What that means is, let's say someone just watched 30 pitches, and then they're going out to have a coffee break. And you want them to be your salesperson. You want them to be able to easily repeat that to somebody else because it caught their interest. So capturing their interest is one thing, but making it so that it's really simple so that they can then start to talk about to other people. Word of mouth. People talk about word of mouth all the time, how powerful that is. Wow. Recommendations from other people, that's word of mouth. That's the best way to be able to build your brand. Indeed. And it's devilishly difficult to make it so simple and so compelling that people can then be able to be your salesperson to somebody else. So think about that and how you can get that message. So just a point of order around the words, less is more. 25 words max on a slide. What you're looking at here, I'm not pitching you right now. I am instructing you. I am doing kind of a tutorial. This is not a pitch. I'm actually trying to give you data and information. So you can't go by what I have on the screen to judge about your pitch deck. I'm showing you other pitch deck examples, and you want to strive for simplicity. Large font, few words, lots of white space, and go for pictures because people respond to pictures. People really respond to visual cues, and you want to make it memorable. And they say a picture tells 1,000 words. You leverage that to be able to implant it inside your head. Next slide, please. Bill Gates. Okay, Bill Gates. He shows up later in this presentation in a much more favorable light. Don't do this. Do not do this. Be Steve Jobs. Be the next slide. Be the next slide. The next slide. The next slide? There it is. Be the next slide. Your life in your pocket. The launch of the iPhone. people in the audience went, oh, partially because the iPhone was so amazing and beautiful, but Steve Jobs evolved as a speaker. He was not a very good speaker when he first started out. And some of you guys will struggle as well too, and that's okay. But he became a masterful speaker, and he really understood the zen of presentation, how to really distill things down and to make an impact. And just look at that slide, how simple that is. 9 words, large picture. Strive for that. That's what you really want to be shooting for. That's something to emulate. So let's look at somebody who's not Steve Jobs. Something, perhaps you might be working on. I picked a medical device because some of you are doing something, everybody's doing things around COVID. Let's go to the next slide and take a look at this. This is decent. This is a decent slide, right? It has a compelling picture. We've all had that little pinprick on the tip of our finger, ouch, to get the blood out. And it talks, their mission is no more finger sticks. And they give some cases along the side there, but let's look at a better version of that slide. The next slide, please. Our mission, no more finger sticks, no more sticking you in the finger to get that blood. And everybody who looks at that, they can relate to it. It's something shared humanity around the world. And that's something that's super important to be able to leverage. And it's memorable. And it's something where, I just had my coffee break. I'd really love to talk to the person who's doing that one company around eliminating the finger stick so that they could do glucose measurement. Okay, great. So let's dig into the template that was provided you now that you have some background about investors and sort of the idea of what a pitch is. And let's dig more into the content, but specifically around the guidelines of the template, and use some more real world examples that I pulled from pitch decks that raised hundreds of millions, billions of dollars over the years, just so you can look at some best in class examples. So this is the first slide. Name your company. Let's go to the next slide, please. So what you really want here is a wow. If you can get a wow from people, or you can get something that really makes them kind of, here's something that a lot of people are afraid of. They're afraid of that everybody's judging them. Oh my God, I have to go talk publicly, and everybody is going to be sitting there just going, I dare you to entertain me, or you know what, I don't believe what you're talking about. That's not the problem. The biggest problem is this: the blue light of the phone. People don't care. People are not paying attention. They're distracted. They're thinking about their kids, or their car's broken, or what they're going to eat for lunch. You need to be able to break through that, because we're all human with our human emotions. And you need to be able to capture them in the first 7 seconds. And you have to capture them in the first slide. So let's go to the next slide and see some examples of that. On the next slide, please, thanks. So Airbnb. Oh, let's go back one more to that one. Airbnb, this is their pitch deck. Book rooms with locals rather than hotels. That's interesting. Never even thought of that. Booking a room in somebody's house instead of a hotel. Wow. That first line was so evocative that there's one investor, a very, very successful investor, who invested in Uber, who invested in Twitter. And when he saw that, he thought, oh, he had a very strong reaction. It was a negative reaction, but he had a strong reaction. His reaction was, oh my God, who are the freaks on either side of this transaction? A stranger staying in somebody else's strange house? Like, oh my God, this is not just a bad idea, but it's dangerous and reckless. You should shut the company down. Now the company's worth $32 billion. And later he said, we didn't build 400-room hotels historically. People traveled and stayed at other people's houses along the way. So good job, carry on. But this very first introductory slide here, it was very successful in raising their rounds and turning them into what is effectively the largest effective hotel chain in the world without owning any hotels or owning any rooms. So I think it's really interesting to be able to take guidance from that. And let's look at their next two slides. They address a problem and then they talk about the solution. So next slide, please. So price, disconnection, and inconvenience. It doesn't exist yet. This is back probably 12, 13 years ago. So next slide. People can save money when booking, make money when hosting, and they get to have a cultural connection. And that simple solution, that web platform around that, has absolutely ignited the market and turned Airbnb into a juggernaut. Let's look at the similar slides from Uber, how Uber set up the problem and also posed a solution. So taxi cabs before Uber, just ridiculous, very old school. I felt like it was, the 1920s rather than, the new millennium when it launched. And there's a lot of monopolies around taxis as well too. Service was terrible and price was super high, and people were just not using smartphones. So next slide, please. So Uber came up with the solution of this on-demand car service. From suffering themselves, the founders themselves suffered around that, and updating it with kick-ass technology, and really incentivizing the drivers and having people own just like they're the biggest transportation company in the world without owning any cars or employing really many drivers, just like Airbnb is. So looking at something from a completely new perspective. So let's look at from there, looking at the market analysis and what you need to address there. So let's jump into the next slide, please, Amy. So here's one way of approaching the market analysis on the next slide, please. So you want to look at the entire addressable market. So there's the TAM, which is the whole universe, the whole potential. And that's a nice guide. It's a nice guidepost to be able to get you on your way, but it's not very useful unless you really look at the serviceable addressable market. So you can't just look at, for instance, all money that's being spent on transportation for Uber. You're not going after the entire transportation market, including trains and planes and boats and everything in between. What you really want to talk about is the serviceable addressable market, which is the local transportation that's not public, say limos and taxis. And then define your SOM, S-O-M, which is your share of the market, what you're realistically going to be able to capture. So let's look at a real world example back from Airbnb on the next slide, please. So all of the trips booked worldwide, almost 2 billion. And so, but some of them are cruise ships, and some of them are premium hotels, and some of them are large villas. It's not really a true representation of the market that Airbnb is going after. So that's really about a quarter of that total addressable market is the serviceable market, and their share of market, they estimate, is about 2% of that. So of 2 billion, cut that by 75%, you have 500 million, and then let's cut that by 98%. So 2% of that, or less than 1% of the total market, but still very compelling. over 10 million trips potentially booked with Airbnb. So this is something that really captures a lot of attention around the VC. It's really important. Any investor is going to really look at that. They want to go big. They want to really look at if you're going to start a startup, you might as well go after a big market. You might as well shoot for the stars, because then you'll end up at the moon, even if you don't make it. But if you go for a small market, then if you don't get to where you would like to go, then it's not very attractive for the investor. Okay, next slide, please, Amy. There's also another way of talking about the market opportunity. This is a company called Monthly. So they've defined their target customer. So specifically, we're going to do a business-to-business service, and we're going to go for new companies that are less than 100 staff, and they don't have an IT department. And we're going to target specifically the C-suite, so CXO, CEO, CFO, COO, and pitch them our subscription model. So it's nice to kind of blend that together to have the whole TAM, SAM, SOM, and also the target customer there. So you can see here's the big opportunity and what we're going to be going after, and here's a specific target that we're going after to really show that you understand both the market and you understand the decision maker. And whether you're going for a business to business or a business to consumer, whether you're selling directly to a consumer or a business, you're selling to a human, you're selling to a person. So you should really approach that in the same way. Okay, next slide. I'm going to talk about product service overview. So here's the next slide after this is another slide from Uber. So telling exactly how the service works from an end user perspective. I'm a member, I use my phone, and I have a guaranteed pickup, which is a big deal because a taxi was not a guaranteed pickup. You could be left stranded, and you also had no idea when it was coming. You couldn't see in real time, and that's why Uber was so sexy. And I remember just walking out of an Uber or a Didi, as they have here in China, and not having to pay, and just thinking, wow, it's so compelling. So another example of a slide from a successful pitch deck is Peloton. So Peloton is a public company that on the next slide that brings spinning workouts. My face is covering that slide, but I'll read it to you. Peloton makes hard work fun. Our brand's about making the hard work enjoyable. We represent this by heroing our content. So we make our users the hero, but also showing hard work. And then next slide is again from this company Monthly. Here's our solution. We put all your SaaS subscriptions into a central system and single dashboard and monthly credit funding it. So it's a really clear solution with limited amount of words and very simple and pleasing graphics. So what you want when you're pitching this is you want people to be able to read and understand what's going on, and then focus back on you, because you want them to be able to get it, but then you want to reinforce what they've read and taken away with one specific takeaway point, so that you can really deep dive and make it memorable for them. Okay, next slide in the template is around sales and marketing. How are you gonna get new users? Let's go to the next slide, which is the go-to-market plan from Uber. And they had a really simple approach, which was we're going to do referrals and we're going to make it viral to become, the premium taxi service. That was their initial go-to-market plan. This is pre-launch for them. On the next slide, we have the marketing plan for them as well too, about how they're going to turn leads into paying clients. And again, 3 simple steps, 3 simple icons, very limited text, and a nice sort of like thesis. Because everybody knows at this stage, unless you have a live product and some historical numbers, it's kind of a guess. And you're guessing and you're making stuff up. And that's fine, but it has to be credible, and it has to be well thought out, and it has to be based on some sort of tried and true tactic from another startup. So let's go into the next slide around competitor analysis. There's 2 ways to typically do this. Let's go to the next slide, which is the quadrant, where you always want to be up and to the right. Is that up and to the right? Here's up and to the right. Up and to the right. So you make the other competitors all get pushed into different quadrants that are less favorable. So Airbnb is affordable, and they have online transactions, and they're up and to the right, and it really is clear where they position yourself and why they're differentiated from the other players in the market. And here's another way of doing it on the next slide. Again, this is this company monthly. They identify 4 competitors, and they say that, you know what, these companies can also do what we do, but they don't target companies less than 100. They're only going for larger companies. So that's a sweet spot for us. And that's where we can really thrive in the market. That's how we differentiate ourselves. Okay, moving right along, the financial part of the pitch template that you've been provided. Let's look at the next slide, please. Moving right along onto the financials. And let's go to the WeWork slide, which shows their revenue growth. And this is a really compelling graphic, again, up and to the right. EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's basically their profit, and it shows their revenue and profit already over the last few years. That's pretty compelling. But wait, Rich, we don't even have any users, never mind any revenue or profits. Okay, great. Then let's look at maybe a more early stage company. Next slide with Buffer. Buffer's got 800 paying users. Nice run rate, very, very sweet software margins, 97% gross margins. So it really shows a nice growth rate there. And if you don't have actuals, then you show some projections. You start counting your chickens before they hatch, so to speak. And then let's showcase the team. A couple of different ways, or many different ways to do this. Let's look at the team slide, Amy, please. Let's just go straight into YouTube. This is YouTube's slide for their first fundraising. Let's go to the next slide, please. Great. And then here's a company called Copper Cow on the next slide to bring some girl power, some female founders into the mix. Pretty awesome company. I really like what they're doing. She has Vietnamese heritage, and she's taking Vietnamese coffee into the Western markets. And yeah, what's important there with the team, if there's any sort of internships or side projects or any validation you can show outside of your studies and your interests, then that certainly can be helpful. And then finally, the last slide, what's next? So how do you see your business in 10 years? So let's go to the next slide. We bring back our friend, Mr. Gates, and he famously said, on the next slide, please, thanks. He famously said, you estimate what you can do in 1 year, but you underestimate what you can do in 10 years. So next slide, please. What we really want to do in this last slide is talk about your BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal. And that's a term coined by Jim Collins, who wrote a number of books, his most famous being From Good to Great. And he talks about having this North Star or this Everest peak that you want to climb, your really big, hairy, audacious goal. Let's go to the slide after that, please, Amy. And the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal, it combines financials with what you and your company are most passionate about and where you can be the best in the world. So have fun with this and really look at, like, this is what we want to be in a decade. And because you underestimate what you can do in a decade, then really leave this as a really strong final punch, and make sure perhaps on the last slide or when you check out, you leave people with one word or one gesture or something to make you memorable. Okay, great. So that takes us through the template. We still have about 25 minutes left. And I'm going to talk now, hopefully I can do this in about 10 minutes. Yeah, about the actual physical energy, confidence, voice when you're pitching. And it's really fascinating if you look at TED Talks. If you go to the TED.com website, there was a study that showed that if somebody watched the talk with or without sound, the ones that did well with or without sound. So the top ranked talks also did well when they didn't have sound, because people were able to show their body language. So storytelling is hugely important. You need to bring some confidence and energy. I know that there's this idea that you need to be maybe humble, and maybe culturally you may not feel very comfortable in being larger in life, but this is a fun exercise. This is an opportunity for you to push yourself outside your comfort zone. This is something really that can help you to be a better and different version of yourself. So I would really encourage you all to do something really that makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, just to be able to bring extra energy and extra excitement. So we're going to talk about body language and voice. So let's go to the next slide, please. So we as human beings, we're a few million years old, but a couple 100,000 years as modern humans, Homo sapiens in 70,000 years ago, but 200, 300,000 years ago, we were doing this. We were around the fire. We were telling stories to each other around the fire. 70,000 years ago, we became indistinguishable probably from modern man. 13,000 years ago, the agricultural revolution. 5,000 years ago, civilization. 500 years ago, the printing press. 50 years ago, in the scientific revolution, and 50 years ago, the internet. And I don't know, 35 years ago, PowerPoint. So PowerPoint is a very, very small piece of our entire timeline of existence. We are hardwired for this, for this sitting around a campfire, learning from elders, getting taken away by stories so that we can remember our ancestors and learn how to hunt and which plants we should be harvesting, and all kinds of fun and interesting things that just stuck right into our minds. So I know that as students, you might feel that it's a little frivolous or even whimsical or even unprofessional to think about storytelling, but it's the actual opposite. That's a problem that I see again and again, is that someone is in the real world and they are now professional, so therefore I must speak in a very professional manner with very limited and professional stilted mannerisms, and I should talk about data and numbers and professional things. Data and numbers are important to make decisions. This is not what this is about. This is about capturing the attention, about exciting people, about transferring what you have in your head to a group of people so that you can persuade them. And storytelling is so powerful. Let's go to the next slide. A lot of you, I'm sure, remember this from your childhood. That scene in Nemo where Dory says, hey, tell us the story. All the baby turtles come around. Yeah. Oh boy, this is gonna be good. This is gonna be good. And people just surrender themselves. Take me on a journey. Tell me a story. Tell me a story. It's something that is so visceral and so hardwired into our DNA that I want you to remember that. And it's something that's powerful for the rest of your lives because it's so compelling. Let's go to the next slide, please, about body language. So this is based on a study from the 70s. Some people may dispute it. That's really, something like 93% of what is communicated is through facial expressions and body language and eye contact and the modulation of your voice. And the words themselves are not quite as powerful as the delivery of those words. And whether it's 7:38, 55, or whether it's 33, 33, 33, or who knows what the breakdown is, all three are important. And I want you to really remember when you're presenting. I'm standing about maybe a little bit less than a meter away from the screen. And I have lights coming onto me here, and I am square. I am facing my shoulders, my hips, my knees, my toes are all pointing straight to the screen. I'm looking straight at the screen. I'm not turning around, trying to point to a presentation. I'm not putting my eyes over here or putting my eyes over here. I'm locked in, my feet firmly on the ground, and I am connected, and I am solid, and I am open. I'm wide open. And oftentimes I see people when they do presentations, they're either have their arms folded like this, or they're turning around looking at the screen behind them. Why? Because this part of our body is vulnerable. This is soft, our bellies. And if someone wants to hurt us, then we cover up or we turn our back so that they can hit us back here. If we're afraid, then we have these fear poses, then we're turning around or we're covering ourselves up or we're trying to cover our faces. If I'm open like this, if my palms are out and my chest is open and my arms are open and I'm totally square at you, I'm vulnerable. Like you could jab me with a knife or a stick. And that vulnerability allows you to connect better with the audience because they feel, okay, you're vulnerable, therefore you're trusting and open to me, and therefore I feel better. It's really important to remember that people very much react to how you make them feel. We are not thinking machines that feel. We are feeling machines that sometimes think. I would say 80+% of the time we're feeling something. We're not really thinking about it. We think that we're very rational beings as humans, even if you're, a very well-educated, smart student, you're still hardwired as a feeling machine. So you have to make people feel comfortable. And how do you make them feel comfortable? By showing that you're comfortable. If I'm comfortable, then I'm going to make you comfortable. And I'm comfortable because I'm squared away at you. I'm open. My palms are open. I'm using body, arm, hand gestures. I'm looking you straight in the eye. I'm using facial expressions, and I'm modulating my voice to show excitement. Let's go to this next slide about voice. There's a lot of things that you can do with your voice to be able to get people to listen to you. And one of the most important things that you can say is nothing. That pause. A lot of you are like, oh, wait a second, did he just freeze? Did my internet connection go? Speaking more slowly, breathing, having a large pause to be able to make an impact. Those are all very, very simple techniques, but it also shows to the listener that you're very confident with what you're talking about and what you're saying. It's a super, super powerful technique, and you need to modulate your voice and put emphasis on words and make sure that you're really thinking about how what you're saying and how you're saying it connects with the message that you want to convey. So the last thing I'll say is that you're going to practice at least 20 times, right? At least 20 times. If it's a 5-minute pitch, that means that's a 100-minute commitment, a couple of hours of your life. You should do this pitch so many times that it's out of your head, because everybody has experienced this or seen this when you ask somebody something and they're looking up and to the right, they're trying to think of the words. You should not be thinking of the words. You should not be thinking about what you're saying. It should be so fully ingested and digested in you that then you can be present. Then you can easily tell the story and show your confidence and excitement and use your voice and your body language to really convey extra messages. And I really highly recommend pitching to as many different kinds of people as you can. Send the video around to a bunch of people and get deliberate feedback. Seek out criticism. Seek out areas that you can improve in, and make sure that you give people permission to tell you, you know what, I didn't like it that you were not making eye contact, or I really didn't understand what you were saying, or you were speaking too fast, or I don't know what that word means. You should use this time between now and the pitch competition to be able to just rinse and repeat and try so many new cycles of this, that you remove all of these ambiguities and jargon and confusion, and you become so comfortable with it that when you actually submit the video, it's nice and tight, and it's a beautiful 5-minute nugget that someone can then ingest. So we're going to go into Q&A right now. We have a few minutes, but I also want you to be prepared for the Q&A. So the way that the pitch competition is going to work is that your 5-minute video is going to be submitted, and then you have a 3-minute live window where you're talking to the judges. And I would like all of you to really be ready for some tough love, be ready for some hard questions. And if it's your first time responding to this kind of like public questioning of something that you feel so passionate about, it can be tough. It really can be tough. And probably the best advice I can give is to never be defensive, to always thank the judge and say, that's interesting, and have your numbers and have your messages ready. It's really good to have 1, 2, or maybe maximum 3 messages ready, so that if you can't really answer a question, or if you can answer it, to be able to block and bridge. It would say, that's a great question. You know, I think that's interesting, and here's the answer there. But the more important thing is this, and to be able to re-emphasize what your key messages are. So that's all I have for now. Thank you for sitting through a 80-minute monologue about pitching. Any Q&A, any Q, I have the A. Send through your questions and I'll do my best to answer them. Alrighty then. I'm waiting for some questions to come in and I'm just gonna quietly look at the screen until they come in. Awkward. This is awkward. It's not awkward. It's not awkward. You know, Jerry Seinfeld, one of my favorite comedians, he talks about how people in a survey said that they were more afraid of public speaking than they were of death. I am more afraid to give a presentation than I am to die of cancer. It's kind of crazy, which means that if you're talking at somebody's funeral, statistically, you would rather be in the box than standing there talking to everybody. Oh, he was an amazing man. So my point is, there's no reason to be afraid. Nobody's judging. Everybody's in this together. This is exciting. This is an opportunity for all of you to improve your persuasion and public speaking skills. And everybody's going to be rooting for you. And you get to pre-record it, so you don't have to worry about some gaps like this. So we got a question all the way from Old Blighty from England. It says, how to identify potential ideal investors. So if you go back to the slide, right now, early stage investors and accelerators, they will only look at you if you have a prototype, if you've actually already launched something. So investors really want to see that you can get other people to do work with you for equity for free, kind of bootstrap it, or you found some way to create some money through some projects, or to be able to raise some small seed round, or to get some kind of grant or maybe some crowdfunding there. So what you really want to do is you want to get to launch. You want to get some kind of feedback and traction from the users. And once you do that, if you're able to do that, because it's notoriously difficult, then you want to look very closely at the industry that you're in and the geographies that you're servicing and the type of users that you're targeting. And you can look at accelerators or early stage seed funds. You know, targeting the investors is one thing, but getting access to them is another. So what you'd like to be able to do is maybe you know, apply for an accelerator. You can do that without any kind of connection to them, but you can also maybe get an advisor or two to the company. And those advisors can help to maybe intro you potentially to some investors, and also do more pitch competitions, because at those pitch competitions, they often have other investors that are in the audience. So we got a question from Colombia. Terrific. How to be sure that what is relevant to people outside your country is connected with your local needs? That's a challenge. I would say that if you're going to launch something, launch it locally first. Make sure you get your house in order. Scratch an itch, if you will. Solve a problem that's local. And because you're going to understand that market better, you're going to understand the users better. You're going to be able to deploy resources and recruit team and, you know, create a product and do that marketing and support much better locally. And then look to grow something international from there. But oftentimes things are fairly universal if there's a strong utility around them. So for Malaysia, what would you rather focus on during the pitching, the details or the ambitions of the business? Not the details. It's about the big picture. You really want to capture the big picture thinking. You want to tell a broad sweeping story about the problem that you're solving and what your solution is. And you really want to stick to broad sweeping top level areas. You don't want to dig deep into the details. Let me see what else we have here. From the China region, is it fine to attach popular footage in our pitching presentation? So I guess what they mean by that is maybe some sort of a video clip. I think it's fine to show some kind of a video demo, or maybe some video that has some market insight or validation, but it needs to be super powerful. It needs to really be relevant, so that and it shouldn't take up more than 60 seconds. That's already 20% of your entire pitch. And I'd also really recommend, I talked about this in the beginning, is looking at some other pitches on YouTube from, say, Shark Tank or from other pitch competitions. All right, now we have one from Africa. In the financial sections, what would you use as a benchmark to create projected results? Marketing spend, costs. So everybody knows that it's really just wetting your finger and trying to see if there's some wind out there. All of the projections are likely based on some sort of best guesstimate. We see typically going 3 years down the road on what the revenue projections are. I mean, I would say there has to be some sort of, whatever industry that you're in, you can Google up some sort of benchmark around what kind of marketing spend there would be. And, you shouldn't just look at marketing spend, but really try to look at cost per acquisition. So customer acquisition cost, CAC. I would really look up CAC and LTV. So if you're looking, CAC is the customer acquisition cost and LTV is lifetime value. And you want to make sure that your lifetime value is at least 2, 3, or more X of the customer acquisition cost. And you should be looking at some the most kind of relevant data, if you can get it, of what it would cost to acquire a customer, because then you'll have a much more better time of it when you can maybe defend in your Q&A. So is there a difference between online and offline pitching? That comes from Russia. So yeah, so online, you're basically making like a TV commercial, and I would do something similar to this, where you're capturing somebody from the waist up, and you can see their full arm length there. I would make sure that lighting is as good as possible, background is as least distracting as possible, and you have something at eye level. And I wouldn't. I'd make sure that you're looking directly into the screen and not make it so that you can't even see your video, so that you're not even shown in the screen and you're not distracted. And you're pitching to this tiny little hole right here, rather than the audience. Because when you're doing it to the audience, what you really want to do is you want to kind of own the stage and move from side to side and make some eye contact with specific people. But here, what you really want to do is to be able to connect with the cameras as best as you can. Indonesia, is it better to tell investors the bitter truth or just leave that out? I'm in Indonesia right now. I'm in Bali. I've been here since Chinese New Year, so nice to see our Indonesian friends. I think it's best to be totally transparent and honest, so that you already have let them know that you've thought of this. This is the situation, this is the complication, and this is the resolution. Yes, we know that that risk exists out here. This is our way of approaching that, or we're going to turn that risk into an opportunity. Because if you haven't already addressed it, then they probably will, and investors always appreciate that when you go one step ahead. Is it better to pitch as a team or individually? That's a question from China. I'll leave that up to you. I mean, it's nice to have everybody involved. It's difficult to do it very, very well, because the whole idea is that this is a competition. It's not a something where everybody has to participate. That's not strictly true. Everybody should be involved in coming up with the idea and building the deck and giving feedback. But I would say it's actually it's really up to you whether you really feel that you can make it work with everybody doing it, because there's going to be transitions between everybody. Maybe if you can really leverage the fact that this is all digital, and you can maybe come up with some sort of way to edit it so that it's actually even more compelling, then I think that could be a differentiator and could give you some maybe competitive advantage. Look at some other questions. So I have a question from M. Leon or M. Lion. What if our addressable market changes or expands along with our development in the future? What you want to do is, I think you want to look at your snapshot right now of what your total addressable market is, at the moment, because you could make a projection as well too. You could say, here's our addressable market now, here's our addressable market in 2 or 3 years, and here's our addressable market in 4 or 5 years. In the same way that WeWork did in a previous slide. Or you could just show a snapshot right now and just say, this is the existing addressable market, and this is what we are pursuing right now. And that's all also, can be enough, unless there's really good data, because that WeWork slide was based on some sort of projection from analysts. If you can find that data, then great. But if you're just doing some sort of an estimate yourself, then it's best to only do that if you can have something that's from a third party. Any particular advice? Question from Mexico about how to fund social projects, specifically education oriented. Well, with social projects, as I understand it, it's not really my swim lane, but I haven't been that involved with social projects, but it's about grants. It's about applying for grants. And I think you have to be really, really good at writing 30, 40-page grant proposals. That's a superpower if you can get really good at doing that, or find somebody who can help you to do that, or get really good at determining which grants are even available. Yeah, so if there's only 60 seconds to pitch, then what would be the most important message to give? And that's kind of like a classic elevator pitch. So you're in an elevator, you get on the elevator and you see, oh, look, there's a famous investor, and I'm going to pitch her right now before the elevator stops at the top floor, and I have 60 seconds to do that. And typically the best, and you know what, nobody wants to be pitched when they're in an elevator. It's called an elevator pitch, but nobody really loves it. But what you really want to have people take away is that there is a problem and there is a solution, and you have the specific solution for that because of your technology, your team, your ability to attract that market. But yeah, I think, I don't know if anybody's ever really gotten funding in an elevator or in 60 seconds. It might have happened, but thanks for that question. Yeah, I think one common mistake in a pitch, it's a question from Mexico, is that people try to have too much of a buildup, and they do something that's not very clear. It's kind of a mystery, or they're trying to give a lot of back data before they just state, this is what we do. And let us tell you why that's interesting. So I think one of the biggest mistakes is not making it clear and concise enough and straight to the point. That's a common mistake. And maybe time for one more question. And for those of you who maybe weren't here before, I mean, the real simple takeaways for pitching is that you're really telling a story. You're trying to get somebody captured within the first few seconds so that you can take them on an arc about why they should be talking to you again and digging deeper around what you have to offer. And that's all about having a really clear and concise and very compelling story arc around the problem, solution, and what you can uniquely offer. All right, last question, again from Colombia. So do investors only look at the money-making opportunity, or is it the social environmental impact of the business taken into account, and what percentage? So they're actually, you know, specifically for this pitch competition, there is criteria on the website, and the idea and the social impact. There's an allocation towards that, so that's certainly something that's taken into consideration. But you know, this isn't something that is really all about the social impact and the environmental impact. It's really about creating a viable, sustainable, scalable business, and that's the foundation. And then there's also the backdrop of how it's going to have impact socially and environmentally. Great. Thank you, one and all. It was a real pleasure to connect to people around planet Earth. I can't wait to see all of your presentations. Super exciting time for all of you. Have fun with this. Dig into it. Experiment. Don't be afraid to look a little foolish. Get outside your comfort zone. Have fun. Thanks very much. Good night, good morning, good afternoon, everybody.